We are live. Welcome, everybody, to the Crypto Mining Tools podcast. We're here today with our co-host, Ethan.
Hey, everyone.
Ethan Zerka, and I'm your host, Scott Offord. And our guest today is Tony Gertz. Is that right? Tony Gertz?
Gertz.
Is how you say it?
That's correct. Yeah,
All right. We're really happy to have you today because, normally we're interviewing the providers, the people that are offering services and people with products. But today we really wanted to talk to you about the opposite end of that, being coming from a customer's point of view. And, Tony, you had contacted me, I think it was on email or Telegram, and you had just mentioned, you've had some really bad experiences, and you finally have come up with some good experiences in the miner hosting, realm. And I had asked you, hey, why don't you write some of that out for me so I can review it and kind of understand what you're talking about and what the timeline is. So you did. And when I got that email from you, it was very, very interesting to hear what you had to say. And so I shared it with my team, with Ethan as well. And it was a real learning experience for us just to hear some of the issues that can be come up upon as a customer of a hosting facility or multiple hosting facilities. So yeah, Tony, we are glad to have you here. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself, and we like to just understand how you got into the space in the first place, what got you into Bitcoin, things like that. So
well, back in 2012, basically had a friend mention this whole Bitcoin thing, and I thought he was kind of crazy because I don't understand. How do you have something like that and have it be secure? It's digital. Everything can be, somebody can find a way. And looked into the technology, and I thought, oh, okay, this is what this solves. So I decided to sort of pursue it as just sort of a hobby on the side, and I built a GPU rig and, grew up with computers. I'm not a programmer or a hardware engineer by any means. But I'm pretty tech savvy, so I built a 4 GPU rig back in 2012, and
nice,
converted it to Litecoin later on, things like that, and I managed to get in pretty early in the pre-buy for some Butterfly Labs products.
Right.
I got lucky in that, if anybody's familiar with that whole ordeal, but managed to get my 2 units and quickly resell them on eBay before
do a flip. Right.
I mean, I didn't want to, but that whole ordeal was such a mess. So, and then, bought some Bitmain products here and there, but I was just a home miner essentially, as a hobby. And of course that all changed when, everything really started taking off, right?
Yeah.
The price changed. And then I was sitting here going, I don't think this is just a hobby anymore. And I'm going to buy some more miners and buy them in bulk and figure out what I can do with them and where they need to go. And so that put me down the path of looking for colocation facilities and places where I could, store them and mine with them.
Now, were you one of those rare people that back in the day were able to mine 5 Bitcoin a day? Did you ever accomplish that?
5 a day. I don't think I was doing 5 a day. But gosh, I'm sure everybody in this space can look back at some point in time and say, why was I selling these for $10 to try to get my money back?
Right.
Yeah.
But it is what it is, right? We all should have bought McDonald's or IBM or Apple or whatever.
Right. That's really awesome. So, after reading your stories, Tony, I personally can relate a lot to the things that you'd mentioned, the pitfalls that you've experienced. I've actually experienced myself. So can you share a little bit with the audience about that?
Yeah. Do you just want me to start chronologically?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll talk about the provider in Canada later, I guess. But my first formative experience was with a provider out of Washington, and I think it was a smaller operation. Is the experience I get, because it wasn't this person's only job, right? You could Google them and see that they were a programmer and did other things, which didn't actually affect the service, the tech support side of service, in terms of reboots or things like that. But what I ran into trouble with there in that situation was when my contract was up, and I guess the way a lot of these colocation facilities have priced this, at least from my perspective, looking at this now for 3 years, is, you know, they're not charging you their base rate of electric plus 10% or plus 20%. They're also adjusting based on price. So
Bitcoin, you mean?
Yes. Yeah. So this provider I had locked into a 6-month we were going to lock into a contract, and then he didn't want to. So it would have been to his benefit in the end had we locked into a contract. So I was a month to month with like a last month prepaid. I think I was with him for about 5 or 6 months, and prices had gone down and a number of my miners weren't profitable. So I was like, let's just pull them back and I'll see if I can find another facility or maybe resell them and see what happens. But right now I'm just losing money. So I emailed him and said, I think this is the last month, you know, I have the down payment. You know, if things change, maybe we'll look at turning them back up again, but I'm going to have to, you know, get them back and everything.
How many miners was this?
This wasn't too many. I think this was about 9 or 10. Just a number of some S9s and some Humalong T1s and things like that. But this has been like 2.5 years ago, 2 years ago, roughly. So not a lot of miners. And the problem came into once I was trying to get these shipped back to me, his responses took a long time, like a week. And normally his responses were within 24 or 48 hours.
Yeah.
For service end of things. And that's why it was kind of surprising. So he first tried to convince me to mine at a loss with him, which
just keep it going.
Yeah, which no. I understand you're foregoing the shipping cost, sure, but I'm not going to mine at a loss for you because I still have to pay you. It doesn't make any sense. I might as well buy a coin or whatever. So that was kind of a red flag. Like, he must think I'm not very intelligent or I don't understand the whole thing. So that went on for like 2 or 3 weeks, like one email, and then a week later he'd respond, and then a week later he'd respond. And I told him, I'm like, I'll buy the labels. I'll make this as easy as possible. Like, it's in our contract about shipping units back, and it's always in the contract. Like, sometimes they'll say, you know, it costs $25 per miner, or sometimes they'll just say you pay the shipping. And, you know, if you've been with somebody for a year, they're not really going to charge you a packing fee. Or sometimes they do, and it's small. It's part of the cost of doing business.
Sure.
Right?
Now, so the miners were still running, or were they still hashing to your pool?
They hashed for that last month, like my last month down payment, right? Like,
while you were trying to get them secured as turned off and shipped back to you, they were still hashing because they were hashing out on the prepayment.
Yes, yes and no. I didn't start the ship them back portion until about a week until that was going to end.
Okay.
But I think he might have emailed me and said, "Well, prices are stable. Do you still want to stay with me?" And I was like, "Nah, I still want them back." So then I started this whole process. And yeah, he just tried to get me to mine with him, and I told him I'd pay for the labels, like the pickup, just let me know when. I'm being flexible, trying to be as considerate as possible, understanding that this isn't everybody's full-time job, and I can't snap my fingers and my units get shipped back. But he then came up with this idea where I was going to send him $1,000 in Bitcoin. He was going to ship my units back and return what was left over to me, which again, kind of a odd thing. Yeah, exactly. Shaking your head.
Red flag. Yeah.
I'm not doing this. Are you kidding me? I was like, can you send me an invoice maybe that details all the costs?
At least, yeah.
I can send you, at least. And then I can send you just what that is. And of course, didn't respond for a week. And then he asked me to mine with him again and all this. And eventually I was like, look, I mean, I don't know what it would actually look like to have to get a lawyer and threaten somebody with that. But I emailed him and was like, look, man, this is going to go legal. And at this
Tony,
point,
I have a quick question for you. Do you think there might have been a possibility that he put an aftermarket firmware on your machines and was kind of like stealing the overhead of hash, the extra hash that they were producing? And maybe that's why he was so resistant to kind of ship them back, or he kept encouraging you, like let's keep mining together. Let's keep it happening. Just out of curiosity, Did that ever cross your mind?
It didn't with him, because after my month ended, they weren't hashing anymore. So it's possible he could have just been using my ASICs to mine during that period, which maybe. When they came back, they all had the pool information in there, so that would have been a little bit of work. I do think there are probably some people or providers in Canada that might have done stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's an interesting concept, yeah, because Ethan and I just talked about that recently on our last episode with JP, where people install aftermarket firmware, and it can increase the hash rate, maybe increase the wattage consumed as well, but sometimes they can tune them and get a little bit more out of them, and so if it's if they're doing something like that, it actually is possible to take a little bit of that hash rate for themselves, perhaps.
Sure. Yeah. And if you're running a decent sized farm, let's say a couple of thousand machines, that could, really add up to some serious, free hash, basically.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay. So you said you eventually did get them back. How did that evolve?
Yeah. How did you get them back?
I basically had to send a threatening email saying I was going to have to find a lawyer and pursue legal action, because there's no reason this was like 3 months or something this is going on.
Yeah.
And he shipped them out the next week. I mean, that was the end of it.
Yeah. So that worked. That was enough for him.
Yeah. I just don't get it. And he posted something on Reddit.
Oh, he tried to stain you.
No, he posted something like 3 or 4 months ago. Reddit's not a great source of any
right
anything crypto related as far as I'm concerned, but it just popped up on my feed, and it was somebody in like r/Bitcoin mining saying they were trying to come up with a catalog of colocation facilities and things like that. And he popped in and was like, "Oh, I offer colocation services out of Washington." And I popped in, and I was like,
don't.
I was trying to be nice. I was like, I would highly caution against the service provider. Here's a brief summary of what happened. And he responded back and just said I was extremely problematic client and stuff. And I wish I could just say, I am.
Right.
But yeah. And then he offered to take me back in as another client. I was like, you gotta be kidding. That was to provoke me. It kind of worked.
This guy is classic.
Yeah.
Out of one side of his mouth, he's cursing. The other side of his mouth, he's like, "Hey, you want to do business?"
Yeah. Be a politician. I mean, Jesus.
So yeah, tell us about your next experience. I mean, obviously that was not a positive experience. Tell us about.
Or so once you had those miners back, I mean, what was the economy like at that point as far as Bitcoin, the difficulty? So those were like S9s, you said.
I had some S9s, some Halong T1s. I think I had 2 D3s with him, which I just told him to keep.
Yeah, those things became worthless quick.
Yeah, I know that, and that whole story was I didn't buy them when they came out because luckily I didn't. But eventually they became really cheap, and the market was doing well. And then they were kind of profitable for about 4 or 5 months, and that's when I bought 2 used devices and had good luck with them. But in terms of the shipping cost, it wasn't even worth it. I was like, you have some free paperweights,
Right.
Yeah.
But the market was still fine with the S9s and the T1s at that time if you could get a lower rate. I think this is kind of when the S11s came out, and they would have been in T15s. I think they were available for pre-purchase. I think early that January, February, March, April. So I think I got 2 T15s coming out sometime that spring as well. But yeah, so I was still buying devices based on the market, and that'd be a whole other interesting podcast to do, is equipment purchase. I've made some really awesome decisions, and I've made some really bad decisions.
We should have you back again about that then.
Go through another history of good and bad decisions. That's a whole other interesting sphere of the space here.
So with that first provider, were you a smaller client of his, or did you kind of feel like maybe all of his clients were about your size?
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
I don't think his total capacity was that large. Like, I think it was under a megawatt.
Okay.
I don't know how many devices he had himself running. I assume if you own a colocation facility, you also have some of your own devices running there. I think that
doing some self-mining.
Yeah. I don't, totally guessing here, but I don't think it makes sense for anybody just to open up a colocation facility and not run any of their own devices.
Sure.
I think largely they're opening up a facility. You only have so much capital to open the facility itself and only purchase, so many S17s, S19s, or whatever's going on now to fill it up. It's sort of like a way of hedging almost against.
Yeah. You want to maybe try to reach that next threshold where you're actually using up the power that you paid for in order to get that discount or whatever it is. Yeah. So there's multiple reasons why people might want to do hosting services while they're doing self-mining at the same time. Yeah.
Right. And that's, I don't know if you guys are trying to get into whether being a small client versus a large client matters. It probably does in a lot of places, and it probably does.
Yeah.
I don't know that from the tech support side, from the business end, I don't know how much it would matter if you're talking like my 50 ASICs, if they're all just, standard SHA-256 miners, if they're just doing reboots on them and that's all I pretty much have to do for those devices anyways, I don't know if it matters if I have 400 or 50 because it's going to be roughly the same rate of reboot and tech support per anyways.
Yeah. So from my experience on the hosting provider side, and dealing with larger and smaller clients, sometimes what I felt was the smaller clients were the biggest pain in the butts, right? Because they're constantly looking at their pool, they're looking at their app and trying to see how many units are up because every single miner matters to them. So yeah, it's possible that these smaller clients are feel like more of a pain, but it all comes down to the contract, right? They're saying that they're going to have such and such percent uptime, and they're going to maintain your miners up to the standard. Yeah, or if they need to be sent for repair, they'll help you to do that on a timely basis. So yeah, it really shouldn't matter if you're big or small.
I can completely see what you're saying though, because the very first facility I went to that was about an hour and a half out of where I'm at down in Georgia, the guys, great, super nice. They told me some stories about doing it. Like, I am not surprised. Like they had a whole deal where somebody organized basically a group buy, but a group servicing. So one person was supposed to be in charge of these 100 miners. Total disaster. And I see that somebody who owns 2 miners they're obsessing over, thinking they're going to be a millionaire doing that, is checking why is my hash rate down a half a terahash today?
Yeah.
Hey, Scott, what's going on? Why do you notice anything weird? Like they don't understand how much the hash rate varies and the pool side and the reject rate and things like that. And that stuff varies. Yeah. I can totally see that.
But when you were first talking about this offline to us, you had said, you really don't feel like you were a very unreasonable or overly persnickety client, right?
Yeah.
You have reasonable expectations.
I think so. Like I'm not emailing tech support every other week saying, I don't like this pool anymore. Can you guys change all the pool information on all my miners? I'm getting I'm getting an extra 0.1% reject rate out of this pool. I need to try a different one. I'm not doing that at all.
Yeah. So okay, then Ethan was asking where did you go from there?
Well, before you go into that, I'd first like to give a big shout out to our sponsor of today's podcast, Novablock. Novablock is relatively new, a newer pool in the industry, and they believe that as hash rate is shifting from China to North America, that they want to provide a pool that's better than the rest out there, and they want to do this by educating their customers and giving transparency. And you guys may have heard in a previous podcast with us, a client talking about how much they love Novablock and why they think it's a better pool. So do yourself a favor, give them a shot, give them a try, and Scott's gonna show you guys how to get a good deal with them.
Yeah, and actually, that person that was talking about,
there we go,
Novablock is right there. Immersion Systems, so they're very happy. we had them on as a guest, and so it was interesting how that worked out. So if you go to the website and log in or sign up, there is an invitation code. So it's very easy. Just type that in, OFFORD18. And what that does is it will reduce your pool fees down to 1.8% for lifetime.
And I'd also like to mention that if you have a lot of hash rate, don't hesitate to reach out to Novablock and tell them, hey, I have a lot of hash rate I can offer to your pool, and try to get a better deal with them. They will work with you.
Yeah. So thank you, Novablock, for helping us to keep this podcast running.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Novablock. Okay, Tony, so tell us about your next adventure and getting hosting and with your miners.
Absolutely. Real quick, kind of just to address something Scott brought up. I will say that there have been, when you get into altcoin mining, some of those devices are not very reliable. And on one sense, I'm like, you did decide and agree to accept these miners in your facility. And so if they need a reboot every single week, which, gosh, some of them really do.
Yeah.
Same time, I would totally get it if a provider said, "Oh yeah, we'll take all these units from you, but we're not taking any of those. Those are problematic." Because I have at the facility I'm with right now, which I'm very, very happy with, they charge me a smaller percentage more for obelisk miners.
Huh.
And I will say, like, they do require, even with their auto reboot function, they do require more reboots than
more hands-on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it sounds like a company like that might have already had experience with these different types of miners, so they know, hey, if we're going to take them on, it's going to take a little bit more management, so we should charge a little bit more of a premium.
Sure.
Right.
Okay.
Right. And they're a pretty large colocation company, from what I can tell. So they knew, and they probably knew about some other types of miners as well.
Yeah.
But if a miner goes down and I email, hey, this needs rebooted when you get a chance, kind of a thing, I'm not expecting that to be back up in an hour or two or four, or necessarily even that day. So I'm sure there are some small clients, as you mentioned, that
expect that
right away, which is obviously not realistic.
Yeah. Okay, so where are we at in the timeline then of your story? What year? What's going on in the market?
This would have been now, I think, spring-ish of 2018.
Okay.
And I was getting some of the units back from Washington, and I had sent a number of new units I purchased out to a facility in New York.
Okay.
And
how did you hear about this New York facility?
So after the events were going on in Washington, I decided to not necessarily just accept, like, based on price or something like that. I started to try to do what research you can, and by that I mean at least email them beforehand, try to get a feel of how they're responding back to you. Are they just giving you a one sentence response to your inquiry? Trying to get some sort of like social understanding from the facility. A lot of websites are out of date. Their pricing's completely out of date. It changes all the time. As I mentioned, they always say they have a VPN and you can always get remote access. It's not.
Yeah.
So I started doing research that way and just sending out, maybe looked into 10 facilities or emailed at least 10 facilities. And that's just a general inquiry. It wasn't like a 10 back and forth response. I need this. I want to see a video of this. I want to meet your staff. None of that.
Would you always recommend using a VPN when you host with someone else, with a hosting provider, so you can manage things yourself?
On my side of it, I feel like if I do need something that's kind of picky, like changing a pool or something, it just makes it easier on them. That being said, I understand the logistics of managing, running, and operating a facility like on the scales that a lot of these co-location facilities can be pretty crazy. And I'm not up on the software side and the security concerns that they might have from that. let's say I do update some firmware with something that's not great, and now I have a huge problem. I've created a big problem for them.
Right.
Sure.
Yeah. So I guess there are pros and cons both ways. Giving you access to those miners,
right,
is one thing. Yeah. So then there's some providers that have software that can act as a management panel instead of giving VPN access. Where if you want to reboot your miner, you can. If you want to change a pool, you can. So it gives limited access without actually giving that tunnel into their facility.
Right.
Yeah. So that's okay.
And I've never had any experience with any of those. I've never seen it offered. I'm sure it. I know they do exist, but yeah, I've never seen any of the colocations offer that as a service.
And the reason I think for that, and I do have experience with this because when I actually still own like 1.5% of a hosting company, little, and we provided software like that, and the clients just loved it, absolutely loved it, and it helped us, and it helped the client a lot. But the issue is when we actually tried to sell this management software to other farms so that they can offer it as a service, they really were hesitant about just one more fee, one more thing to have to pay for. And they were struggling to say, well, should we just absorb this fee or should we pass it on to the customer and say, hey, customer, if you want better access to your miners, you're going to pay $2 a month or, whatever it is per miner. So yeah, there was always that question of, is it going to really be worth it to the mining farm? And can we pass that fee off to the client or not?
What was it, a question of them not believing that it would in the end save them in terms of the IT cost on their end? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's beyond obvious that if you can empower the customers at your facility, it relieves your burden of labor and management costs, and puts it onto them. And if they can pay you a little bit extra for that, then that's even a greater margin of profit.
So I do have to say though, this was being attempted at a time where it was barely profitable to be running an S9 in the first place.
Sure.
So to think, oh my goodness, like my miner is making $2 a month, and you want me to pay $2 a month to offer this? Yeah.
So
New York.
Yeah. So this one was interesting because it was like a 3-month deposit, months 1, 6, and 12. And for about 6 or 7 months, they were absolutely fantastic. Didn't really have any issues. Occasional reboot. Every once in a while, they would have, a bad storm would come through or something and say, we're going to shut everything down for 24 hours. And so they would shut everything down for 24 hours. No big deal.
And how did you hear about this company?
Yeah.
Google searching and emailing.
Okay.
Really?
Okay.
Huh.
Yeah. Yep. You have to go to about, at least back then, I had to go to probably page 2 or 3 to find somebody that actually had their prices were accurate. Half the people email don't respond because they might not be in business or they're not be taking on new clients. A lot of people this time we're not taking on new clients.
Yeah.
But the thing about everything was working out there. Their tech support was weird. I just didn't really have any big problems with them. But they had a phone number you could text that you'd say, hey, this miner's down, reboot it, thank you. And you could email them directly. But they would never let you know if they've rebooted it. So the issue there is if you have a problem that's larger than just a reboot, you don't know if they've actually gone to reboot it. So if the power supply is bad or, the control board is bad, you would have no indication. So now you're kind of like troubleshooting on your end as just this giant question mark. Like, hey, you have to email somebody and say, hey, did you reboot it? Which seems weird to me because I basically asked them if they did their job.
Right.
And it maybe it comes off critical. At least that's the way I'm thinking of it. So like, hey, did you reboot this? Maybe the power supply is bad. I don't know. And then it would show up online and it'd be like, oh, so you didn't reboot it yet, or it's a weird troubleshooting issue where they had to reboot it twice because something larger is going on. You don't know.
Right. So it sounds like some sort of a customer service ticketing software might have been helpful there, where you could follow up, or they could actually reply. Maybe there was just some communication gap between the actual technician in the mine versus
and customer support. Yeah.
They weren't communicating back and forth to each other, perhaps.
Left hand not talking to the right hand problem.
Right. One time I got a text back. I didn't text them at all or have a reboot. I just got a text them. It said, "We rebooted 2 of your miners." I'm like, what?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, what? So yeah, definitely a communication issue. And I'm sympathetic. Like I understand that a lot of these facilities, they might have gotten into something over their head at first. They might be understaffed. The prices changed. Obviously, we've seen a lot of volatility in the past 2 years. So I don't know if they're operating on skeleton crews or whatnot. I get pinched, they get pinched, we're all getting pinched. So I get it. But about 6 or 7 months into this experience, they partnered with somebody else. And I don't know the whole deal of this arrangement. I don't even know if this necessarily was, what caused their service to sort of decline. But it did. It noticeably started to decline, and they started having some weird things. So their service went down for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
It went down for 2 weeks, and they said it was somebody had cut their Ethernet, or their backbone rather, in the facility.
Wow.
I don't know if that's a jilted ex-employee. Who knows?
Wow. Yeah.
Could be 100% legitimate. Could be completely fake.
Yeah. Because I mean, in those situations where your miners just kind of go offline and they don't come back within a few hours, you really got to wonder what's going on.
Yeah. What's happening? What's going on?
If you can't physically go to that facility and see it with your own eyes, yeah, they could really just kind of spin a story.
And there was a time, maybe a month or two before things started getting bad, where everything went offline. Emailed them, like, you probably have a situation going on. I get it. They're all offline. It's not just my units. What is going on? Like a day later, they emailed back and said, yeah, somebody sent us a couple hundred overclocked units. They don't allow overclocked units. They hooked them all up, and it did something to their power system. And that was like a 2-day outage. But why didn't you just email
Couldn't
us?
they just unplug, like some of them? And
maybe it blew something.
That's what I'm thinking. It blew something with a transformer. Again, not an engineer.
Breaker, or I guess if a whole transformer went out, but that's why you have breakers, so you don't overload the transformer. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah.
All right, Tony, we're starting to get to the end of our podcast here, and I have one final question for you. What is the worst experience that you've had, dealing with a host?
Real quick, I'll try to sum up the New York one because that was kind of ridiculous in the first place. Down for 2 weeks, up for 2 weeks, then down for a month. And I'm thinking like mining wasn't great at the time, so it is what it is. I'm under contract, whatever. I'll get all my mining time in. And they came back and expected me to pay for 4 of those 6 weeks. They were lucky enough to credit me for 2.
Yeah.
I was like, what are you talking about? Like, you can't credit me for 6 weeks of service.
Wow.
It is a contract that they can't do that. So I had to softly throw the contract at them. I don't even know why a company would ask you
right
first place. And that gets into what we were talking about earlier, where maybe they were shutting down for a month because they were being pinched on their budget, and then they just expected people to pay and make up for all the loss. I don't know. Maybe
they were hashing to their own pools. Yeah,
could be a whole number of things that happen.
Yeah, and then So before we go, though, I do want to hear about your great experience. I think you said your latest hosting provider, and why don't you just go ahead and name who that is and tell us a little bit about them? Yeah,
sure. So I'm now with the vast majority of my miners. I'm with 2 facilities, but the vast majority are with Compute North, and they've been very, very good. They have a ticketing system. Who would have thought? Things like that. And just their communication's been great. Every time anything from a reboot to a bigger issue, They sell you back and say it's online, it's hashing. Please confirm with us. It's great. Their billing's been great.
Yeah.
Everything.
Compute North.
Yeah.
They're good.
Minnesota company. So.
Yep. So that's Ro and.
Yeah, I've got
David.
Ro's business card right here.
Yeah.
And then I've got what is it? Marshall, the president.
Oh yeah.
We got his. Yeah. Good thing it's blurry.
They managed to do it at a pretty reasonable price too. So whatever they're doing it right.
And how many miners are you running right now there?
Right there, I have about 30 something. I'd have to pull up a spreadsheet to find out. But yeah, I've got about 30 something, and I'm planning on sending more to them as soon as I get stuff back from my other facility. So
yeah,
that's awesome. That's really great.
And what kind of advice would you give somebody that's new, that's thinking about getting into this? Maybe they started like you. They're hosting in their basement, not hosting, but running their own miners in their basement or the garage. Now their wife is getting upset. My house is too hot. I can't stand this noise.
Another $2,000 electric bill this month. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. What kind of advice do you have then for people that are looking to offload their babies to another provider?
I would say, I wish there was some source where people could review this, but I'm also skeptical of online reviews as well. So I kind of get why those don't exist. But if you're emailing back and forth, maybe with somebody who's a smaller provider, I would say kind of go with your gut instinct. If they seem a little bit odd in their emailing, if they're the way they're addressing issues or talking to you over email seems a bit weird.
Use your spider sense.
Yeah, either they don't have time for you, or which fine, then you don't want to be with them. If they don't, if they're willing to deal with a small client, but they don't really want to, then don't go with them. Or they might be somebody who's interested in trying to get you to pay for a month of service that wasn't provided, or not send your miners back and want you to send them $1,000 in Bitcoin to send 7-8 miners back.
Yeah.
Kind of go with your gut on that.
And it sounds like really having that contract to fall back on is a very good idea, because I've seen so many deals out there where, somebody just sent the miners and they're kind of going on their word to get them up and running. But there has been some times where you have had to revisit that contract and say, hey, this is what the contract says. I don't want to take you to court. Let's follow the contract.
Follow what we agreed to.
Yeah, I would say there's one thing I've never seen in a contract that I wish I would have now, because a statute of how long it takes them to ship your units back.
Or just a response time frame. Like they have 3 business days to respond for any inquiry.
A lot of them actually do say their response time is 24 or 48 hours.
Yeah.
But
actually taking them off the rack and packing them up and making them available for pickup or to be put in shipment.
Right.
That'll be a good thing for sure.
That's a great idea. Just a heads up, Tony. I don't know if you've been to our directory listing or not on cryptomining.tools.
I have. So you put that out a week or two ago, or not so long ago, right?
We just launched a couple of weeks ago, and we're really excited to. Scott's got to show off here. We're really excited to provide really good quality hosting providers and kind of help people like yourself, people like myself, through the rhetoric of Google searching and emails and who can you trust and who you can't trust and all those things. So in our listing, it goes through and it gives you many different hosting types or management options. For the people who don't know exactly what their power requirements are, you can just simply select the miners that you already have and the quantity, and it will calculate what your power demand will be. And then when you go next, you can filter through, based on region or based on, what price is affordable for your budget. Now, we do plan in the future to kind of create a rating system. And if a listing is below a certain rating or something like that, then they'll be automatically booted off of our listing. But we're really hoping that this will change things, will be a game changer and make it easier for the community to find proper hosting.
Yeah. Well, Tony, if somebody wanted to contact you, maybe like on Telegram or whatnot, how could they find you?
Yeah, Telegram's the best way to contact me, and I say that just, and I don't. If a lot of people do email me about stuff, I don't necessarily want my email box flooded. Respond within 24 to 48 hours. Yeah, I think I shared my Telegram with you guys earlier.
I'll post it right here. Sunniest Solomon.
All right, Sunniest Solomon. I like that. That's awesome.
All right. Well, Tony, it was great to have you on. I love your perspective and your story.
Yes.
I know we didn't hear it all. You've had a lot more horrible experiences than good, but I'm glad to hear that you finally are having some good experiences in this field.
Yeah. And I just want to put it out there. If you are a hosting directory and you guys want to be listed in our directory listing, please reach out to Scott or myself so we can get you guys registered on the site and connected with potential hosting clients.
Yeah. All right, Tony.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for your time. Talk to you later. Bye.
All right. Bye.